Hello, everybody. This is the talk of the Disinfo Resilience Network. It's been quite a time since the last video, and I'm very happy to have not one but two very prominent guests today. And I will not waste a lot of time introducing them because I couldn't do it as well as they can do it. But they are both experts in, of course, information warfare, of course, in security, in Eastern European affairs, and in everything that went wrong the last 30, 40 years in our discourse about political affairs. I want to welcome Nathalie Vogel and Martin Malek. Nathalie, I will start with you. How are you doing? What are you doing? And please introduce yourself better than I could do it.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you, and I'm happy to see Martin here, whom I highly considered probably one of the best, if not the best, Austrian expert on all matters post-Soviet space. My name is Nathalie Vogel. I am I'm a researcher at the Institute of World Politics in Washington, D.C. I am affiliated with the Center for Intermarium Studies. My field of research is specifically the role of intelligence services in the fight against hybrid warfare. And my area of studies is Central Eastern Europe. And by background, I'm French born. I am of Cossack extraction. I've worked in Russia, just like actually very similar way like Martin Malek. I was behind enemy's line. I've witnessed quite a lot. So I don't know Russia from the books only. I have experienced Russia, yes. So my specific area of expertise is really how intelligence services manage or don't manage to tackle hybrid attacks. That's what I am researching.
Martin, can you introduce yourself better than I can do it?
First of all, thank you for having me. Yes, my name is Martin Malek. I'm a political scientist, and I'm basically non-affiliated, independent, non-partisan, as I hope at least, a scholar and observer of post-Soviet, especially post-Soviet, but not only affairs. I have done some, so to speak, field studies in several post-Soviet republics, especially in the Southern Caucasus, in Russia and in Ukraine. And yes, I have spent a lot of time, especially in Russia and Ukraine. Without going into details that would lead us too far, only want to say that I have published some papers in several languages, especially, but not only, about post-Soviet affairs. And you will not be really astonished to learn that since February 22, I am especially concerned about Ukraine and Russia's war against it. And the consequences of all these events in Eastern Europe. And I am quite sure that we will feel even if this war should end tomorrow, which will not be the case, we still will feel the consequences of these events for a very, very long time. I'm ready for dealing with, as I hope, from a scientific analytical point of view, not as a political player. I'm totally independent in this sense as well. I've never been a member of a party, and I have no idea to join one. I do not even know which one I could join. But it is totally clear that the consequences of Russia's war against Ukraine and maybe other wars in Eastern Europe will be felt for a very, very long time, almost certainly for the decades to come.
Nathalie, when we speak about hybrid warfare, we also speak about disinformation or influence campaigns. And when we speak about influence campaigns, in my opinion, we should not only speak about some blatant disinformation for fake pictures and AI-generated content, but also about these frame narratives that are part of the Russian propaganda and part of the collaborators in the West who spread it. One of these narratives is that the West provoked Russia, that the West did not integrate Russia or was hostile towards Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. What do you say about these accusations? I mean, I already gave it a little bit of a bias because I, of course, not believe in it. But what are the key arguments against it, especially according to your expertise and personal experience?
Well, I mean, this is a classic. There are various myths, and one of them, the main one, is the so-called question of the enlargement of NATO, which is seen as a provocation, and also the narrative according to which guarantees had been given that there would be no enlargement. This has been completely debunked by Mikhail Gorbachev himself. I was recently rereading an old article by Stephen Pichler, who wrote 2014 an article. He was over at Brookings, I think, and he wrote an article debunking it really very, very well. So this never happened. Yet it's still a central idea of the disinformation. And now when it comes to my personal experience, well, I can tell you that the very creation of the NATO-Russia Council in 2002, after the summit of Rome, is the very proof that everything was tried. Let's go back in time. It was the post 9/11 time. And every effort was made to engage Russia at all levels, even at intelligence level. And this endeavor took a blow in 2008, of course, with the attack on Georgia, and the collaboration within NRC was completely discontinued in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. And NRC was declared defunct at this NATO summit in Madrid in 2022, of course, quite logically. But in the time between 2002 and 2008, everyone went out of his way to engage, to involve, to consult with Russia at all levels, and specifically even in the intelligence area where, for instance, the fight against terrorism was very big on the agenda. John Cipher, who is the former head of the clandestine service over at the CIA, who explains that one morning the director of the CIA arrived with some news. It was after 9/11. They were asked now to engage with the Russian counterparts. And of course, the people at the Russia department went, oh my God, they've gone all crazy. But, you know, they tried. And I've witnessed it, and I've witnessed it at all levels. And I think Martin will have a similar experience where you are at a meeting and you are sitting right across a Russian, what we call in German, Betonkopf, like concrete head. We understand that it's absolutely not his agenda. It's just a farce. He's sitting there, does not believe a word he's saying, but yet you are kind of playing, let's engage one another. And it's been a big theater that, that was hard to stomach. That has been played. And as I said, I saw it myself, and I was in all this. So I just the thing I can say is that in retrospective, John Cipher, for instance, again, wrote an article in 2020, yes, 5 years ago in Washington Post with former colleagues of his. And it's an amazing article, and I can invite you to read it. I've picked a quote from this article because I find it quite telling. The article is called "Trump Wants the CIA to Cooperate with Russia. We tried it. It was a disaster." And the quote from this article by Cipher, Mark Polymeropoulos, Stephen Hall, and Douglas Wise is, "You will love it. The periodic desire to work with the Russians on terrorism is akin to someone who buys a baboon as a pet, only to be surprised to have their face ripped off. Then, after recovering, he goes and buys another baboon." So that pretty much sums it up. Until 2008, they tried. We all tried. We sat down. We organized meetings, conferences, you name it. We did almost, when I look back at sometimes I think this is amazing. And nothing happened. Nothing positive, at least, happened. There is still, of course, the duty to share. So it means that even nowadays, we are sharing information if we hear that Russian population is targeted by, for instance, a jihadist attack. Then information will be shared at the intelligence level. It's called a duty to share. The other way is not really working well, because the Russians use these kinds of channels to do lawfare, to practice lawfare against individuals they want to have arrested. So they claim they are terrorists, they put them on red notice, and they expect them to be arrested and extradited to Russia. That's the kind of cooperation they have with the West. Other than that, it's been a disaster. And there was zero reason after 2008 to entertain close relations with the Russian Federation. They were at war with Estonia. They had attacked Estonia, the Bronze Soldier. They attacked Georgia. And there is even less reasons after 2014 to build bridges to Russia. So that's my take on it from my experience.
Thank you very much for the overview, especially for mentioning Estonia. This is a case that I quite remember, because I know Estonia and like Estonia a lot. And this is, I think, a problem that we have as analysts, that there are so many cases that we should have the elevator pitch is getting longer and longer, because so much happened that contradicts this pro-Russian or Russian-friendly position. So thank you very much. Martin, if you take a look at Austria, and I mean, everything that Nathalie mentioned before, we have and had in Austria, at least we had, now it's of course better, but we had on a much higher level. Yeah? Every time somebody asks me, what's the difference between Austria and Germany regarding Russia relations, I say it's everything the same, except in Austria it's worse. It's worse. On the other hand, we don't have a GDR, so it's maybe a little bit simplified, because we don't have this Družba movement, this real strong pro-Russian friendship movement. I mean, we have everything, but it's quite small and obscure, and only people like Malek and for instance, all our little clique in the Disinfo Resilience Network are monitoring this. So Martin, what can you tell us about your experiences, and can you give us also quite an overview? Do you have, I guess you have something to add?
Well, if you ask me about Austria, it's difficult to say what it has in common with Germany. Well, there are, of course, a lot of differences. One of them is that Germany is much more important than Austria. Of course, Austria is much bigger. It has much more significant economic and political weight in the world. And this is valid, especially from a Russian point of view, because to have influence in Austria, well, for Russia, that's, so to speak, nice to have. But not more. Austria doesn't play any important role in the European Union, let alone the world. But Germany has. Germany has much more to say, of course, and therefore Germany is for Russia much more important. It is much more important, by the way, not only from a political point of view, but as a supplier of technologies, because it is a matter of common knowledge that Russia tries and in many cases succeeds in delivering state-of-the-art technologies for its military-industrial complex. There were, however, several cases in Austria as well. Some of them even have experienced media coverage. But I'm totally sure that this is only a peak of the iceberg, and that in fact much more is going on in Austria as well. We had in the media, for example, that the example of a company from Vienna, if I'm not mistaken, which manufactures some electronic devices, and they somehow ended up in Russia. Or let's take the example of the engines for the Iranian-originated drones, which Russia uses in its war against Ukraine. One of the first generations of these drones was equipped with Austrian engines. It should have caused a scandal, but it didn't. That was astonishing at the first glance. At the second, it wasn't. Because this seems to be, well, in Austria, we sometimes make scandals out of events which are not really that important, not really worth. But on the other hand, events and which should have turned into scandals are well, do not really receive any public or political attention. Because or let's mention which is maybe even, or was even more important, the decades-long Austrian import of Russian gas. This started in '68. Well, which already makes clear that it has a very long history, and ended officially only at the end of last year. However, it is not completely clear whether the Russian natural gas really disappeared from the Austrian distribution grid, because many observers in this realm say that the gas stock exchange, as it is called, based in Vienna, by the way, buys and sells gas without in particular knowing where the gas is from, which means that it is quite possible, maybe even likely, that we still in Austria use Russian gas. And this means obviously that we are fueling the Russian war machine. We do that, by the way, in the banking sector as well. We have, this is really no state secret, I mean, everybody knows that. You can open any newspaper and read the economical news. One of Austria's leading banks, Raiffeisen, has a very successful branch in Moscow, which is active for more than 3 decades, and which has earned a lot of money, especially, of course, until the beginning of the, so to speak, big war of Russia against Ukraine, but especially since then. And you can, several Western banks which were earlier active in Moscow have left the Russian market, but Raiffeisen stayed. And it is still in Moscow. And they pay, of course, they pay taxes, hundreds of millions of dollars. They pay taxes every year. And this money straight goes into the Russian war budget. And this, okay, I could tell a lot of this only about this bank. This is not the only topic of our meeting today, but again, this should cause a scandal from the one hand, but on the other hand, again, it's no scandal. It's almost, well, from the point of view of the Austrian public, of the media, of politics, it is a nothing burger. And of course, you can ask why. How is this possible? Why nobody's upset? Well, this is several reasons. We could discuss them for a very long time. But one of the reasons is doubtless the fact that the Raiffeisen Bank is, so to speak, well, to a certain extent, close, some say even very, very close to the People's Party, the Austrian People's Party. And guess who is the Prime Minister of Austria? Mr. Stocker, the head of the Austrian People's Party. And so there will be, of course, never any political pressure upon Raiffeisen to finally leave the Russian market, or to sell the branch in Moscow, or to close down the bank. This, by the way, would even the best solution. But Raiffeisen doesn't want to do that because there's a lot of money in this bank, and they can't move it out from Russia. It is stuck there, so to speak. They can't move it to Austria, and if they would, let's say they would close the bank, the money would be lost. And of course, they will never talk about that in public, but it is totally obvious that they hope that the war against Ukraine will end as soon as possible. Why? Because they are concerned about Ukraine's fate? No, of course not. They are concerned about their money. They want, in the case of the ending of the war, they want to see, dear ladies and gentlemen, now it's really not necessary to leave the Russian market because the war has ended. Where's the problem? And I'm quite sure that in this case, immediately, several or a lot of other Western banks will return to Russia, which, however, does not make Raiffeisen's behavior any better.
I would like to add to this topic about companies and economic exchange. I think we should speak about 2014, because this was the, I think, moment where everybody should have realized that Russia is not a friend, that it's not a very good idea to invest so much into Russia. And we had a lot of people, I don't want to mention names, neither companies or individuals, but we had a lot of people who explained us, some of them even so-called experts on some affairs, international or political scientists, who explained us that we should appease Russia, that the West is actually to blame, and that everything we do is very nice, or even morally good, because of course anti-Americanism played a role, EU skepticism, in not only in the far right, also in far left circles. And I mean, when you recall these times after the annexation of Crimea and the covert invasion of, I mean, it was not even covert. It was so obvious that there were Russian troops in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, and we had so much information back then already. Now we have more. The shutdown of MH17, it was clearly obvious that it was Russian troops. But for instance, in Austria, the vice president of the Austrian-Russian Friendship Association told us that he has only information that points more to the Ukrainians and some things like that. So it was really absurd. And it was not only a social media thing, it was also a mainstream established media thing. It was also something that you could hear on some occasions at the universities. So what do you think about these times? And did we learn from, did we learn from our faults, or do you see any kind of development, Nathalie?
Well, it so happens that I was recently in Potsdam, and I met people who are revisiting this time right now and writing a book that will take a closer look at the responsibility of think tanks and also so-called academia in their ways to address the post 2008 relations of Russia to the West and to NATO countries and to Europe. And this is an issue that is that hasn't been discussed. I mean, it's nobody's fault. If you're in Germany, it's nobody's fault. You see the same people who've been preaching the gospel of the Russian Federation in the past until February 2022, who are suddenly have reinvented themselves as a Ukraine expert and who are obviously suffering from amnesia and forget what they've been saying since 2008. About Russia and about who is supposed to bear responsibility in the developments in Ukraine. We have a problem, and the problem is that we don't call a spade, and people who have been doing this don't get criticized. They are accepted, they're widely accepted again as experts, and I'm very happy that this group of younger specialists is taking a closer look at this, because it's an issue. There are quite amazing things happening in Germany, but they are also happening in Austria, because the German language space is a Swiss, German, Austrian space. So we inherit your experts as well with their pro-Russian bias. And that's quite a problem. On the other hand, we also export our biased experts to Europe.
Sorry to interrupt for one moment, because I have a further question regarding that. I heard from a source recently that we know it all there, and we know it since the Cold War, but they actively pay influencers, for instance. And we have also cases from the Cold War from the academic world where people who were like peace activists were actually spies or agents of influence. Spies is the wrong word, because they were not gathering information, they were disseminating it. What do you think? Is it possible that our intelligence service will finally, and I'm talking not only about the German-speaking world, there are so many US analysts. I mean, they are even more influential. I'm not mentioning names, but there are dozens of them. Do you think that our intelligence will finally realize that this is a problem and it's also worth investigating and exposing it, because it didn't happen?
Well, Germany has had a very tough lessons learned, and I'm always very critical of certain part of German intelligence. I think they have the expertise to do it, and the domestic intelligence has the expertise to do it, and the knowledge. And it's my experience that I have noticed by exchanging with some people information that they absolutely understand and they see through what is going on in certain circles. The problem is always that they politically cannot translate what they have understood and prepared analytically within the framework of the intelligence processing. That's the first problem. The second problem, Austria is such a basket case. I'm sure Martin can say much more. And on the current state of U.S. intelligence, I'm very happy to say that I can't speak about it because I have no real expertise in the field, meaning I don't know really what is going on there right now. I notice that there is a lot of turmoil. And I noticed that obviously disinformation is no issue, and fighting disinformation is no issue for the current administration. That much I can say. the dismantlement of various interagency units that were fighting disinformation is already quite alarming. There again, I mean, they have the expertise, they have the resources, but the political will is not there to actually do anything about it. And then there is, of course, the byproduct of the policy of the current administration, dismantling Voice of America, cuts for Radio Free Europe, etc., etc. Although the Czech government has committed resources and jumps in to save Voice Radio Free Europe, but as you see, I don't see much going on. And as for Austria, I don't want to criticize Austria, but I'm sure Martin can tell you more than what I can tell you. They have reformed. I can't tell you whether it has any positive results yet. Perhaps Martin knows.
So, Martin, we have only a couple of minutes left. I guess not enough to criticize everything that is worth criticizing, but without mentioning names, when you compare the discourse pre-2022 or after 2014, what do you see? What kind of changing do you see? And how do we deal with the pro-Russian voices in Austria since 2022?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and of course the answers are even more difficult. Basically, I think that there's not only one answer, maybe almost certainly several of them.
Try what you can put in 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes left, so.
I see. Well, I only want to quote one of Austria's most famous journalists, Paul Lendwey, who recently said in an interview that it is astonishing to which extent Russia has penetrated Austria. And this affects a lot of spheres. This affects politics. The largest party in the Austrian National Council, the lower house of parliament, is pro-Russian. Okay, it's in the opposition, but nevertheless, it's pro-Russian. It has won the last parliamentary elections and the last European elections, both last year. Or if you read, and I do that sometimes for professional reasons, of course, the yellow press of Austria and the letters to the editor, which opinions are published, which opinions are popular. This is sometimes really, really frightening. And one can ask him or herself what has to happen yet in order to make more people and politicians and opinion leaders above all to understand in which serious situation we are, because it is not entirely clear what would happen if Russia should overwhelm Ukraine, because in this case it is possible or even likely that the war will come much closer to Central Europe than it is now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nathalie Vogel and Martin Malek, two extraordinary analysts and researchers. And I'm sure that it's not the last time we talk, also not in this format. It was a pleasure to speak to you. I guess there are a lot of topics that we will go deeper into in the next months and years. It will not. I mean, I guess this topic will prevail. Unfortunately, it will not. It will be a lot prolonged, even if the war ends or if there is a kind of dirty ceasefire, which is one scenario that we had, for instance, in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, where nobody was speaking about the war anymore. And I think this is also quite dangerous when the topic disappears. Also, the awareness of how dangerous the Russian imperialism and hostile policy towards the West, not only the West, but especially the West is. And we have a lot of awareness work to do. We need to communicate more and let this be a starting point for a new counter-offensive. Yeah, I'm very careful using this word. So have a good evening and enjoy your Sunday. And it was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
It was a
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Thank you. Goodbye.
Completely.
So welcome
So I
back,
said, so
and
first,
we will
right?
speak
But
about
this is a